This week on The Short Game, we transform from mild-mannered podcasters into wall-climbing archery murder machines. Welcome to The Short Game. This is the show where we talk about short video games, games you can probably finish in an evening or a weekend, particularly the kind of games that we like to play. That actually doesn't really make sense, does it? Anyway, whatever. We like to talk about short video games and fitting games into your life. I'm Reagan Kelly, your host, and I'm joined this week, as always, by my good friend, Nate Heininger. How you doing, Nate?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Reagan?
Tell me something about what's new with you, Nate.
I just finished playing Tomb Raider, so I'm all hyped up and feel out of shape.
Feel the blood rushing through your veins.
Yeah, Jesus, that is.
I'm here too, Reagan. Introduce me.
I was going to get to you, Shane. How are you doing? This is my good brother and bro host, my twin, Shane Kelly. How are you doing, Shane?
I'm pretty good.
Yeah, I just finished playing this game like 20 minutes ago.
I just finished it 1 year ago.
So I'm like on edge.
And I just didn't really get around to finishing it yet.
You did finish most of it.
But I really loved it, and I swear I'm almost done.
Oh, okay. Well, the game we're discussing this week is Tomb Raider, but not the one that you may remember from your childhood. We are, of course, discussing 2013's Reboot by Crystal Dynamics. It's just named Tomb Raider. There's no subtitle on this one, no number after it, but most people will call it Tomb Raider 2013 to distinguish it from the original, the reboot, and it is a pretty awesome game. Even though it's maybe not the newest game, if it's one that you missed the first time around, you should go back and pick it up, and now there's many different ways to do that.
Yeah, we'll obviously get in depth with it later, but I just want to say right out of the gates, two things about this game. One, this might be one of my favorite games that I've played in the last couple of years. This was one of the most fun games that I've played in a very long time. And two, I think it's a little too long for this podcast.
We're fudging it a little bit on this one because we usually set our max limit. Our goal is to try to pick games that you can play in, at the most, a week, and usually a weekend or even just a single evening. This game I definitely finished in about a week, but that was a week of a fairly large amount of playing. I'd say that I beat this game in about 13 hours, maybe 12. And I think it's pretty typical.
I was right in that wheelhouse too.
I played the game for about that same amount of time, and I didn't complete it yet.
Yeah.
So it definitely is a game that it goes a little bit outside of the short, kind of our short range here, but it is a fabulous, phenomenal game. So
I don't want this to sound like we're bashing it, though, because I thought it was a great length. And definitely compared to, it still fits our ethos to a degree, because it's still 12 to 13 hours is not that much longer than what a lot of games that we do, which is more like 6 to 8 to 10 hours. So it's another extra play session.
It's a game that you can and should fit into your life, though. And we're talking about fitting games into your life. And I think this was an important game that a lot of people missed.
I played it in a week, and I had like 3 days off work, and I just kind of sat and played it the entire time. But I don't regret it. Like I said, this is one of the most fun games that I've played in a long time, and I'm super glad to talk about it. I probably wouldn't have played it had we not decided to do it for this podcast. And then everywhere I look online after the fact, they're like, one of the greatest games of last year, so much fun, and it's like, I would not have thought a Tomb Raider would be as fun as this.
I had exactly the same response. When this game was initially coming out, I didn't understand at first that it was a reboot of the series. I thought it was another new Tomb Raider game. And Tomb Raider has always been a series of games that's been kind of on the periphery of my, gaming awareness. I didn't play the first one when it was new. I think it came out first on the PlayStation. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't own an original PlayStation, so I didn't get a chance to play it when it was the new hotness and everyone was talking about it. It had ports to all sorts of stuff, so I'm sure there are probably times when I could have played it. I think it even had a Macintosh port when I was, one of these sad, lonely kids who tried to play games on his, OS 8 Macintosh.
Nice.
Yeah, but I didn't own that, and I don't think I ever got a chance to play the original game. I've played a little bit of some of its sequels, but they are of such mixed quality, and the series lacks focus to the point where I don't know if I recommend playing any of them today.
I wound up playing, like you, I haven't really played any of the previous Tomb Raider games. I missed out on the first one and then just didn't feel like I could pick up on all the dense continuity that I'm sure they had. But I did recently play on the PlayStation the Lara Croft and the Temple of Light game. They've done kind of an offshoot series that were the Lara Croft games that don't bear the Tomb Raider name.
Oh, yeah.
They play very differently. It's like a top-down...
It's like a co-op dual-stick shooter kind of thing, right?
That's exactly it. And in that one, she teams up with a 8-foot-tall Aztec fellow, and they solve puzzles whilst defending themselves against wave upon wave of weird monsters. It was actually a surprisingly good game, but I knew it didn't have anything to do with the other Tomb Raider games.
Yeah, it's definitely not a mainline Tomb Raider game. Interestingly enough, as a side note, there's a sequel to that coming out.
Good.
Yeah, it's still also unrelated to the mainline Tomb Raider game, so it's unrelated to the game that we'll be talking about today. And I forget the title of it, but it's another one titled Lara Croft and the such and such. And it's still got the top-down perspective and the dual-stick shooter kind of gameplay.
The game that we're playing now, I would say it's almost... Do you think I would be wrong in saying it owes more to kind of more recent kind of puzzle action platformers like Uncharted than to the original Tomb Raiders?
I think it's a completely different sort of game. The original Tomb Raiders were a kind of action puzzle-solving shooter, but I think that they lent more towards, I think partly just because of the technology at the time, they lent more towards fighting small numbers of bad guys in enclosed small spaces, tombs, of course. And it actually leaned more on puzzles than on action, which I think is a little bit inverted here. And they were not nearly as cinematic.
No.
Yeah, I played the first one, though I don't have super solid memories of it because I played it. I did play it kind of nearabouts when it came out on the original PlayStation that I had. And that's what caught me off guard the most about this game. I did not expect it to be such an intense shooter. It's way more of a combat game than it is anything else. The puzzles are there, certainly, but some of them got me. Some of them were a little trickier than I expected.
They were kind of relegated to these sort of bonus tomb mini levels.
Those were the ones that were really like, this is a tricky puzzle, figure it out. But even still, like, you'd be fighting through a wave after wave of bad guys, making your way through the crazy awesome sets. And then you'd have to figure out how to drop this bell through a gatehouse and get it perfectly to bust the right hole to jump through. And I played it with Molly basically next to me the entire time, and we would work together to figure out the puzzles because some of them were a little trickier. But for the most part, it felt like a shooter way more than it felt like a puzzle game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of the reason why I like puzzlers. But this was one of the most like energetic and exciting games that I've ever played, and that's what I like so much about it.
And it is a shooter to a point, but I think I would say it's more broadly a third-person action game because there's a lot of exciting parts of the game that aren't just about shooting things. There's some sort of traversal platforming stuff that felt really tight and fun.
Stealth, that was pretty good.
Yeah, there was some really fun stealth if you wanted to play it that way.
I thought the reliance throughout on the archery was a really nice direction for the whole game. The bow was really the primary weapon in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll say the stealth, I'd say about half the time was a choice, and I did not make that choice most of the time.
All right, well, let's set up the game for people a little bit more detail. So it does play out in a sort of cinematic third-person perspective. You know, you can control the camera. And as Shane said, I think it owes an enormous debt to the Uncharted series. You know, when you first start the game, you're seeing Lara as she's a younger Lara. She's a less experienced Lara than you would have seen in any other previous Tomb Raider game. So we're really immediately seeing that this is a reboot. This is almost a completely different character than we're familiar with.
Also, one way I noticed that she was different from previous Lara Crofts is she has just a tremendously increased number of polygons.
True enough. But yeah, so the game is beautiful, and we'll talk about the graphics later. But Lara is a young, sort of go-gettery archaeologist who's on a team of archaeologists on a ship.
She's a young go-gettery archaeologist.
I know, it sounds dorky when I say it that way. And it is a little dorky, but that's the great thing about this game is she starts off as this, I wouldn't say exactly naive, because she's clearly a independent, excited, educated, energetic person with actually an interesting background. You get a little bit of a sense that she has a kind of an inexplicably intense amount of survival training in her background, thanks to the weird old guy.
And her father. It was like a combination of her father and her like mentor I think her father, it seemed he died early on, and this new guy, his name was Roth, was like a father figure who, just for whatever reason, trained her like her entire life to have really intense survival skills.
Yes, her dad was Indiana Jones, and then Obi-Wan Kenobi stepped in when he died.
Yeah,
pretty much.
And they really gave her all this training that you kind of got the sense she didn't think she needed, but then suddenly she does. And she's able to rise to the task. So the ship that she's on, investigating, what was the name of the ancient Japanese city that they were supposed to be trying to find? Yamatai. Thank you.
Yeah,
There's
Yamatai.
Totally fictional. They're investigating a totally fictional pseudo-Japanese lost city that they think is in the also totally fictional Devil's Triangle, which is a very stormy part of the Pacific Ocean. And they sail their research ship in. She's accompanied by her good friend
Sam,
who's also a pretty decent character.
Yeah.
It should also be noted that because this is kind of one of the cruxes of it, at Lara's behest do they go in this direction. Everybody else on the ship wants to go look for this ancient city in a different way, and Lara's like, no, I've done my research.
I'm pretty sure it's over here in the Devil's Triangle.
Yeah, they wouldn't call it that for no reason.
I think it's this way, and so they go that way because of her, which sets up a lot of her. There's a whole guilt thing that runs through the whole the game, definitely, all from that.
So she's accompanied by a myriad of lovable or hateable stereotypes. She's got her friend Sam, who's the less capable of the two, and she's the good friend and videographer among the group.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but her backstory is tied into the mysterious nature.
Yes, and we'll leave that to be discussed later. And then, of course, she's got the sassy black girlfriend, and she's got the mean guy who's kind of a know-it-all and a jerk kind of friend, and she's got a variety of characters that are not as well fleshed out as Lara herself, but who do a pretty good job of making you feel like it's not just Lara completely dropped on her own into a situation. You feel like she does have a history and a reason for being there, and also a reason to try to escape. Most of the game, she's trying to save her friends from the mess that she sort of gets them into.
I was pretty fond of of all the characters, even the older guy that was sort of. I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember the name of the guy.
Roth. His name is Roth. Yeah, her kind of mentor.
We'll recap the plot after the spoiler break, so you don't need to know much more about the plot.
Yeah, let me not spoil anything. I was particularly fond of the guy that was the cook on the ship. I thought his character design and voice acting were really awesome.
Yeah, and it does have pretty darn good voice acting.
Yeah, the whole, the thing I started talking about was like the action and the shooting and how fun that was. But honestly, the story is one of my favorite parts. I got more connected with Lara and the crew than a lot of RPG games that or not RPG, but like
Character-driven, story-based games.
Yeah, character-driven games.
I think that's the biggest achievement of this game, is that it really, really balances the cinematic elements with the action elements. The game takes a lot from a game like Uncharted, but something that I think an accusation, or a slight criticism that you could level at particularly the later Uncharted games, is that they are so interested in being cinematic that there are parts of them that have a lot less interactivity than you might want in a video game. And this game, I think, does a really, really good job of balancing that.
I would agree.
When you first jump into the game, and it's still sort of showing you the ropes, it's not super interactive. There are a lot of QuickTime events where you have to, press X to not get crushed by a rock or not get impaled on a stick. There are a lot of sequences that kind of play out, and you just sort of have to walk through them. And there's a lot of early stuff, like when Lara is first collecting some of the basic equipment that you use, like the bow and arrow, and first learning to hunt, you're first getting your handle on the crafting system in the game. That stuff maybe isn't super interactive, but once you get through that first 30, 45 minutes of gameplay and into the real meat of the game, it really opens up, and you kind of stop being on rails, and you start entering a lot of areas where you can really, it's not quite an open world, but the levels get really large, and you can proceed through them in a lot of different ways.
It's a kind of a hub and spoke level design that gives you the freedom to kind of backtrack all over the map. And so the levels feel and are really, really large.
I felt, and maybe I'm misunderstanding this genre, but there were some real Metroidvania aspects of this game where you would go through a map one way and then cause some sort of event that results you to go right back the way you came with the same exact map, but maybe it's twisted a little bit, or you're taking a different route where you're seeing you can like look down the cliff and see the part that you already came through, and then you go back up it, and then later in the game you come right back through you pretty much traverse up and down this side of this mountain like 4 or 5 different times, seeing the same set pieces, but acquiring new skills, acquiring new tools, and having different ways of traversing the same types of maps over and over and over.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, it's not quite an open world like you'd find in something like a GTA, but it does that sort of Metroid-y style of gating. It presents a pretty big area for you to explore, and really the only barrier to your exploration is getting the kinds of equipment that you'll need to make it over certain things. Things like the arrow shot with the rope so that you can create zip lines for yourself, or different types of tools that you would use to pry or open doors, things like that. So as you accumulate new weapons and tools, you open up new types of exploration, and it does have a lot of that kind of Metroid-y feel to it, even though I wouldn't call it a Metroidvania in that it's...
I wouldn't, and that's why
lots of games have that. That's a classic Zelda thing, or what have you.
Yeah, but it's great.
It was definitely well done in this, because it feels like it ties in well with the survival aspects of the game. Mm-hmm. That kind of survival element of the game, in which you can hunt for food and things like that, is something that... and you're always looking for camps that you can kind of camp at to do your leveling up. It's something that I really liked about the game, and I even wish that they had gone further with. I don't know about you guys, but I never found it necessary to do any of the hunting in the game.
I did, unless one of the animals... It was basically an easy way to get experience points, and that was the main reason that I found that they did it. And unless one of the animals, presented itself along my path, I pretty much didn't bother with that.
Well, I think that's part of the way that the game gives you a lot of scalable difficulty. There's a lot of things in this game that are optional objectives. Hunting is a part of that. Things like collecting some of, the game has a lot of collectibles that I widely ignored, but that give you an option to do some extra exploration and add some difficulty.
There were tons of weapon upgrades.
I'll say collectibles, it's not like, get all the statues so you have all the statues. It's a very complex story, and the history of the island that you're exploring is very, very deep and diverse. And the way they handle collectibles is basically by finding them, you unlock more parts of the story.
Yeah.
And you see it. The island has been inhabited by a lot of different people, and you'll find stories like literally journals or scraps of paper, things like that.
Or because she's an archaeologist, even just artifacts, and they'll give you insight. Lara will say something about them.
That was something I liked a lot. I'm generally broadly anti-collectible.
I think we all
They
are.
did sort of spread them throughout the levels, and so I was picking them up where I found them. And the items that you'd find, you'd pick up, and I've seen before in games where the collectibles, you'd pick it up and you'd look at some kind of 3D object, right? And you get to look around at it. But one of the things I really liked in this was you'd look at the object, you'd twist it, turn it, look at the different sides of it, and Laura would kind of comment on it. You'd flip it around and she'd say, oh my gosh, could this really be a 12th century Ming vase? And then you flip it, and then on the bottom it says, made in China, like in English, and she's like, a fake.
Yeah, they definitely don't let you forget that she's an archaeologist.
Yeah.
Intelligent and capable throughout the entire game.
Oh, yeah. And they also, when talking about her character, I mean, she is struggling, as struggling as you can have an action adventure, character, because she's doing ridiculous things, but she's always like keeled over, tired, you're stumbling through
wounded
things,
in grisly ways.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And
thrown down a mountainside.
And I mean, you're getting shot a lot and taking, so it's not like it's hyper realistic or anything, but they at least do it a little bit where you feel the character getting tired. She's sad a lot. It actually, at some point, she's like always kind of moaning and I'm like, oh no, and stuff like that. Which
good impression,
sometimes,
mate. Yeah.
Sometimes it got a little repetitive, but still, they at least tried to make it like this is someone going through something that she had never been through before.
Yeah. What is interesting about it is that the game is not realistic, and yet it lets you suspend your disbelief. It has a lot that does have a kind of a realistic feel to it. It's a kind of a cinematic realism, but it worked. It worked really well.
Like, I got more attached to like Laura and like her story than many other games that I've ever played, and that we haven't hit on it yet. That made the death scenes all the more painful.
The death scenes in this are something that really stands out about it, and you really get set up for, if you come into this not knowing that this game has this aspect, I could see being almost shocked by it.
I definitely was.
Yeah.
I had no idea. And
it reminded me of Resident Evil 4, which had a similar, grisly animated death every time you screwed up. And just such a variety of different ways to die.
And this may sound a little weird, but like there's something different about seeing Lara Croft. I don't know. It's different seeing Mr. McShooty Man get crushed or shot to death versus seeing this slight, younger 20s woman getting destroyed, impaled
through
crushed
the face
by rocks in ways that you see her expression on her face when being crushed by rocks, and you know just which bones broke, and you hear them break. I mean, it's distressing.
It's brutal. There was so I died a fair amount in this game, definitely. I did very well in the combat. I certainly died in the combat, but I handled my own most of the time, being able to get through it. I, for whatever reason, was awful at the press Y at this moment.
Yes.
Oh yeah, the
scenes.
quick time events.
Yeah, there was a quick time event like early on in the game, and tell me, Nate, if this is with the same one that you were dying a lot on. It was very early in the game. She had just started to get some of the weapons. She was running through a burning village, and like she's hiding, and some guy finds her in a house. And that freaking guy killed me 1,000,000 times, and it was so brutal.
I actually did okay on that one. I know what you're talking about, though, because I think you'd set that up for me already. I died like twice on that one. It is super brutal. The one that got me, and this is like the hybrid QuickTime event, you're basically being washed down a river, and you as the player have to swing Lara left and right to dodge stuff, and then at moments like you'll hit a barricade and you pull out your shotgun and have to shoot through the barricade before going through it. And if you die on it, you get impaled by a pole that goes up through her chin and out the top of her head. And she goes like, ah, and just like starts feeling at the pole while looking around, and then just like slowly, dies.
Yeah.
And that one, I hit that pole like 12 times, and none of them were any easier than those. It was hard to watch. And then what's worse is right after that, you go into a thing where you're parachuting, and if you mess up parachuting, you get impaled through the chest by a tree branch. And
There's a lot of impaling in this.
Well, at least in this moment, I impaled between those two scenes, which were back to back. I impaled Laura no less than 25 times, and every single one of them were brutal and painful.
It does
to
make you
watch.
cringe a bit. So you have to be prepared for that. That said, I think that a lot of people complain about the quick time events in this game, and I think that's valid if you really, really hate those. But I think that this game handled them better than most. I wouldn't necessarily say that those were a super compelling part of the gameplay, but they didn't turn me off the way that I think they do some people.
Yeah, I was, whenever the game started, because you go through a couple of them right out of the gates.
Yeah.
And I was like, is this what this is going to be? And they don't do it that often. I mean, it's definitely a part of the game, but it doesn't happen as much as you would think it would the way the game starts out.
Yeah.
And you kind of get into them. I liked this game so much that it worked. It won me over, and I was like, I messed it up all the time, but it does add kind of a dramatic effect to it.
And a lot of them are a part of that balance between the cinematic and the action elements. These moments when Lara is, when you're having to hit Y to avoid grisly death or whatever it might be, those are really just those moments when the game needs to show you Lara doing something really cinematic and interesting that wouldn't be easy to have you do as a player with the controls and rules of the game. And it doesn't do that so often. It really only does it in those moments where it needs to have a real cinematic moment to bridge the gap between two big chunks of gameplay. In many cases, I think it does them instead of cutscenes. And the game has cutscenes, but I think it did a really good job of keeping the cutscenes brief and to the point. I don't think there was a single cutscene in this game that lasted more than 2 minutes.
No, the opener is pretty long, but that's okay because it's the opening to the game.
So gameplay-wise, I think we all agree that this game just really nails the third-person action shooting style of gameplay. I think in some ways it does it better than what I would normally have pointed to as one of the best in the genre, which would be the Uncharted games. I know that, Shane, you're a huge fan of Uncharted, and I'd like to know what your thoughts are about the similarities and differences between these two.
Well, I think they have an enormous amount in common. I think the thing that to me really defines the Uncharted series is it's a game that is driven by story and great characters, which I feel like it shared in common with this. Everything you do is really motivated by moving the story forward. And I think Uncharted has a lot more interesting platforming elements than this game did, although they both have a lot. This game, I think, does a lot of the combat, I think, a little bit better than some of the Uncharted games, especially the earlier ones. One of the things that I think this game does a little bit better than Uncharted would be the kind of survival elements of the game. I really never really feel like Nathan Drake is like in dire peril.
He's never thirsty or hungry. He never needs to sleep.
He's eminently good at what he does, and that's, you know, just a difference in the character. I really felt like I had to fight hard as Lara Croft.
I think one big difference for me is the way that the action, non-shooting parts of the gameplay play out. This game just really, really nails the fun and really hands-on climbing and running and jumping aspects of the game.
Yeah, and it's gorgeous.
Yeah. I know I've been playing a lot of Assassin's Creed recently, and that game, I think my biggest criticism about it is that while it's cool to move from place to place, climbing on top of stuff and making these bizarre jumps and everything, it always feels almost boring to do that, because in Assassin's Creed, you just hold the stick forward and maybe hold down one other button, and your character is, you know, you could point him at a 15-story building and just point go, and he's going to climb over it. And you're never really reaching for things or making those tough jumps or really judging whether you can do stuff. Whereas Tomb Raider, and I think actually Uncharted kind of feels the same way sometimes. In Uncharted, you rarely really have to reach for that extra hard jump or do something that, you know, usually if you can make a jump, it's 100% clear, and I don't feel like there's quite as much actiony, crunchy skill involved.
Oh man, yeah, I fell off so many cliff tops, and
Definitely.
like they definitely do that where you have to hit you'll be on a rock face, and there'll be a ladder like off and to the right, and you have to make the jump up and to the right just perfect to grab with one hand. And then if you can make a clean catch by doing it perfect, or you can make like a half catch by missing it, and you have like a half a second to press X to grab it with your other hand. And that all feels like you did that. Like that, like, cause you can mess it up. And I messed it up all the time. Make the jump, just miss and hit my stupid head on something and fall down the mountain and watch her tumble all the way down the mountain screaming the whole time. It's I definitely, there is like little baby moments of accomplishments, even in just running and climbing.
Mm-hmm. And it nails that, even sometimes at the expense of, I think it's very intentional and probably very smart, but it nails that feel, even at the expense of realism sometimes, because Lara can change directions midair in a kind of a platform gamey kind of way, but it just feels right. And so they go with it, even though they're clearly trying for this realism.
Man, so she obviously performs feats of unimaginable skill, but the one that gets me the most is the ability to run, jump, cross a huge distance, and just hit your chest on the opposite ledge and just catch.
Stick it.
Yeah, and you're just like
On it.
and just pull yourself up every single time. And since they try to make her like tired feeling every time, she's like screams like ow, and I'm just like, if I did that, I would break 4 ribs, fall off the back, you know, and well, probably not make the jump in the first place. But these jumps feel,
Let's be honest,
difficult.
we would have all gone down with the ship in the first scene in this game.
Oh yeah, you're not getting
I'm no Lara. You, sir, are no Lara Croft.
I'm not even on that ship. I'm like, I'm gonna sit this one out, guys. I'm gonna stay home.
I'll watch the documentary later. I'm sure it's going to be good.
Yeah, we're catching it on Netflix when it comes out.
Yeah.
One thing I really wish that they had incorporated in this game, that, you know, back to kind of comparing with Uncharted. Uncharted has one of the ways that Uncharted is cinematic is that many times through big chunks of the game, you're going along with a companion or a buddy. And in Uncharted, the levels are a lot more linear than what you've got here. So, you know, that's something that's a lot more possible. Like if in Uncharted, you might have a level that's, you know, some district of a city that
Or you're
you
on
are
a train.
kind of
Get to the front of the train. About as linear as it gets.
Yeah, pretty linear stuff.
Many very jungle-themed hallways.
But this game, I think, really could have benefited from kind of more back and forth with other characters, even if it was just more of what they were already sort of doing, which is Laura talking with people over the radio.
Yeah. I agree with you there. I think it could have used a little bit more interaction with the other characters to kind of elevate them out of the, like, I think some of them had a little bit of a, ooh, I'm a stereotype. I'm just here for occasional interaction kind of stuff.
Well, stereotypes, there are stereotypes aplenty in the Uncharted games as well.
Oh, so true.
I agree and I disagree. I mean, more character interaction is usually a better thing. You know, you don't want it to be a bathtub story. But I also really
What do you mean
liked
by
it.
bathtub story?
It's like a literary term. You don't want to write a story about a character just sitting in a bathtub.
Oh.
If it's just one person, there's a better way to explain it. But if it's just one person, then it's probably going to be a boring story. You need other characters to make it an interesting story.
More like a hot tub story.
The prototypical is like a dude just sitting there thinking about stuff. That's virtually impossible to write a good story involving only one person.
Yeah.
But I thought the characters were diverse enough between the good guys and the bad guys. And, you know, if you don't immediately jump out and kill everybody, you get a lot of the story of the island and a lot of the story of how the people that you're fighting are dealing with it by listening to the bad guys talk to each other. Mm-hmm. And that's definitely optional because you walk up to them talking and you can like continue hiding and fight them, or you can just jump out there and wail on them.
True.
That's something that the game did well. There are a myriad ways where the game drops clues about the backstory to you. Overhearing your enemies talk to one another, finding kind of journal entries that have been hidden different places. So you never really are lacking things that move the story forward.
Yeah, I thought there was plenty of character interaction, but I mean, I could definitely see more. I guess what I'm saying is I don't think that ever really hurts the story.
Yeah,
no. Having more. But I don't know if this necessarily needed it.
I wouldn't mind a level or two where she might team up with Sam a little more or something like that.
Yeah, but the things Laura does are so ridiculous. It's hard enough for one person to do it. If you've got Sam, this like even frailer like videographer running alongside a mountain as burning embers fall on you, and you jump from like swinging platform to swinging platform, like
swashbuckling.
Yeah, one of the coolest like design choices of this whole game was that it's basically a collapsing old Japanese fort. So it's all wooden and everything kind of is falling apart. So basically, as you're moving, everything behind you is collapsing, or as you're moving forward, everything is collapsing. And so if you had two people on it, there's so many times where you jump to like a single beam that's being supported by a single rope that's tied, that's like, you know, lodged into a brick or into a rock wall. I can't imagine getting through it with two people.
Yeah, that's true. So gameplay-wise, I think we've kind of covered all of the bases. I think it's a incredibly tight, fun action game with some great shooting, and you know, it just stands out as a super fun game to play. What platforms did you guys play the game on?
I played it on my computer using a PS4 controller.
I also played it on PC, on my desktop, although it's available for a ton of platforms now. Shane, how did you play the game?
Same as you on Windows, but I will say that this is one of the first games where I wasn't able to max out all the settings.
Yeah.
On my Windows machine, I had to turn one setting off, and that was the beautiful tress effects.
Oh, see, that was...
I did not get to experience Laura's flowing ponytail in all of its glory. It dropped my frame rate too much.
Oh, I had everything boosted.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, this was the game that when I first built my gaming... Now, this game is available, I should say, on PS3, Xbox 360, PS4 now, Xbox One, Windows PC, and also for Mac. So you can play this on practically anything in your house right now if it will run a game. graphics-wise, it is an absolutely gorgeous game. But if you can, I would encourage you to play it on a Windows PC or, other equivalent with a decent graphics card. Or you
a PS4 apparently really runs it very well.
Oh yeah, I've heard very good things about the PS4 version. That said, they're marketing it as like the definitive edition, I think is what they're calling the PS4 version. And it may indeed be the definitive edition of the game, but you're not really getting any content apart from some motion controls that are new. You're not really getting any content that you won't find in any of the other versions of the game. And the PC version looks freaking phenomenal too. So if that's what you've got, play it there. And you can get it really cheap for Windows on Steam.
Yeah, play this game, man. This game
Absolutely.
Shane mentioned the Tress FX thing. The game has freaking stunning graphics. This was one of the first games I played when I'd first built my gaming PC, and turning everything up and running the benchmark that this game comes with, where it just sort of shows Lara standing in the breeze on top of a mountain. Putting that on was the first thing that made me think, yep, this was a good investment. Glad I bought this thing. It looked phenomenal.
I had one of the biggest reasons I had a hard time with the what'd you call them, QuickTime events, the action cutscenes. I'd just be looking at everything, and I would not see the little circle near her hand that said press X, because I'd just be in awe as like an entire castle is inflamed and crumbling in the background, and my character's just, because they do it very cinematically where she's not always like dead center in the screen. Sometimes she's kind of like back and to the left, and you're seeing a small version of her while you see the whole world. And I just didn't see the little X, so I fell off the map. And then and that happened to me over and over, where
it gives you more opportunity to see those great set pieces.
I did not realize this was a QuickTime event until I died. I'm like, what? How did I? Okay, game over. I just fell off the mountain. She didn't win. She didn't make it.
Well, I would say that if you have a gaming PC, I would play this on gaming PC, because I don't think you're going to get a lot better graphics on something like an Xbox One or PS4. But the PS4 version is pretty new. Once that falls in price a little bit, I think that would be a great way to play this game. Or pick it up in a Steam sale. It's been in every Steam sale of the last year almost. And you can pick it up for a pretty cheap price. Would you guys like to... Now, I know that the story of this game is a lot of fun, but...
I don't think we should spoil it much.
Yeah, we don't,
if
and
at
we
all
don't probably
for people.
need to spoil it much. But I
spent
would,
enough time talking about the mechanics of the game to cover that pretty shortly.
But I would like to talk a little bit about Lara's arc as a character. And so, because that's partly going to involve some plot details, for those of you who may want to avoid the light spoilers that are probably going to be a part of this part of the discussion, I'd like to go ahead and fire off the spoiler break now. So here it is. This is your spoiler break. Like I was saying there, I do think that this game really stands out because of Lara's character and the arc that she goes on. You don't get to see that in a lot of other games. Now, there are games that do have great plot and really interesting central characters, but I don't think I've seen a game that transformed the main character with an arc quite as distinct as Tomb Raider of 2013. We talked at the beginning about how Lara starts out as this, naive, unsure of herself, and, yet really competent and well-trained archaeologist, maybe not the most action-oriented person. And because she's confronted with these horrible circumstances and has to escape these tombs full of gore and giant sinking ships and gigantic planes falling on her head and all these other exciting things, and has to save all of her friends, she goes on this arc of transforming from this mild-mannered person to somebody who is just a complete insane fighting force by the end of the game, a one-woman army. And I think if you were to tally up the number of people she kills here, I think she kills more people than I have had good conversations with.
One of the only things that broke me from the game at all is like really early in the game, she is really concerned about somebody dying. Like before anything happens, she's really concerned about somebody getting hurt, somebody dying, maybe having to be involved in somebody dying. And then like
She has a
5
real
minutes
crisis about killing her
Yeah.
first person in the game.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
actually I thought was one of the most effective moments of kind of characterization in the game was that she really did not want to go in and kill people. She was really forced into that situation.
But then, like 3 minutes after that, you are just just slaying waves of people over and over, and never again is it like.
It does depend a little bit on how you play the game.
It depends
there,
on
but
it depends on the player. Like in my case, that characterization was effective enough that it really pushed me towards the stealth mechanics of the game, and I stayed kind of as a more or less stealthy player for most of the time I played the game.
Mm-hmm.
It does let you play it in different ways, and I
Kind
probably
of.
killed more guys with the bow and arrow, or snuck past people more often than
I
did
think
not.
that this game, it does have an arc. Laura does have an arc from mild-mannered to killing machine. That arc does sort of lean to the left in that, that arc is weighted towards the beginning of the story. Once you get into the meat of the story, Lara has already begun her transformation into this badass. Although by the end of the game, you kind of see the finish of that transformation, and the last few minutes of the game really left me wanting a sequel, because you can see Lara has really turned into an iconic character, something new. That's the thing that I thought really stood out about the ending of the game for me, is that, Lara Croft from the 90s was an iconic character, but mainly because of her look. She was a busty woman who wore tiny shorts, and it was a look that a lot of the, infantile gamers of the era, probably myself included, thought was interesting in some way. But the new Lara is iconic in a whole different way. She is Indiana Jones iconic. She is Star Wars iconic. She has a different feel. She's a kick-ass character.
Yeah, she's an ultimate badass, and a one that you like as like a person, because she seems to be, caring and somebody that you like can get behind, but also she just, again, total badass. It was fun to see that progression.
I do have to say that a lot of the coverage of this game really agrees with what you guys are saying about it, that it presents Lara Croft as a much more fully fleshed out character and so on. And in comparison with the older Tomb Raider games, it definitely is true. Like in the original Tomb Raider games, Lara Croft is just a pretty character with, big polygonal boobs for the presumed teenage male player. And in this game, she's definitely a character. She's definitely a great character. But I will say, like, in this game, I still kind of felt like they were presenting a little bit of cheesecake to me as the player. And that kind of felt sleazy in some of the same way that the older games always did. Like, there are moments where, like, very frequently, Lara has to, like, squeeze through a tight passageway to move from one area to another. And the way the model is done, it seems very calculated to show off the character's body to you.
Really? I don't know.
I agree with Shane to a degree.
There's plenty of situations in this game
Maybe
where I felt like I was being played to as the typical male gamer who's going to want to see hot Lara Croft running around in her short shorts. She climbs that giant tower. You remember, like, she climbs that giant tower, and it's freaking ice cold for like 45 minutes of gameplay, and she's still in a tank top. She spends the whole game in a tank top.
I will give you that. She spends the entire game in a tank top.
She's in the snow killing guys with coats, and she's running around in a tank top.
And she doesn't ever take one of their coats, which I did.
Exactly.
I remember that part of the game and think that was pretty weird.
I want to point out first, it was inevitable that our conversation was going to lead towards Lara Croft's boobs, because every conversation about Lara Croft inevitably ends in that. I agree with you to a degree, Shane, but I also think that it was something that they essentially had to do. That's part of the legacy of the Lara Croft character, right? Mm-hmm. Even if back then it was like a hokey.
But this is a a complete reboot. Like,
Yeah,
they
but
didn't
if they
have to do that.
if they made her flat chested, wouldn't that feel like weird?
I don't know. I feel like we have to stop this conversation for a moment and say that we are three dudes talking on a podcast about an issue that I feel like is inherently difficult for us to discuss without coming off as either total weirdos or assholes or like, okay.
Says the guy who spent 45 minutes telling me about the maid harem game.
Oh my God. Can we please leave that in the past? Internet, please forgive us for anything that may come up in this conversation that doesn't meet the standards to which we aspire. We want to be the enlightened people that you want to listen to on a podcast. And so first off, I thought that this game did have a little bit of that. You do kind of feel that, that some parts of the game were directed towards the male gaze, but far less than you would think for a Tomb Raider game. So I did give it credit for that.
I will agree with you. This game is not a breakthrough for feminism, in gaming, but it is better than any previous Lara Croft game, and it seems like it's trying.
But I think that's the point, though. Like, they had to do, if it's going to be a Lara Croft, a Tomb Raider game, they had to include that element to a degree. And I think they did it as good and like respectfully without making, like, I never really felt like it was done just for the male gaze. I think it was done to keep that as an element of the franchise, and not just like, check out this, like, it's gonna be real hot. It's gonna be real hot when she goes through this cave.
Yeah, and I mean, and keep in mind also that when she goes through those caves, often we're talking about situations in which she is up to her neck in gore or other.
I know. How did they know I would be into that? but no, I think they did do some things really well. They don't. Story-wise, she's not like a sex object. Like, there's no like love interest in the game.
The story is the biggest place I thought it managed to be really positive.
She's very focused on her platonic female buddy, who's also not, presented as a love interest for somebody.
Another spoiler aspect to the game: this is not a game about a character who ever becomes a damsel in distress herself. Instead, she rescues her friend, who is literally a princess. As it turns out, spoiler, we're already past the spoiler break, so it's okay to say that her friend is, in a way, literally a princess. So she literally rescues a princess, a damsel in distress, towards the end of the game in a way that kind of turns that trope on its head.
And even the damsel in distress, like, she tries to stand up for her own, but is like grabbed by many, many, many guys with many, many weapons. It's not even like a helpless woman in distress. It's like a ridiculous situation with like monsters and all these other things that the girl Sam does her best to fend for herself and survive, but it's just, there's not much that you can do in that situation unless you're Lara Croft and you have a bow and arrow, in which case you can kill everything.
I feel like the game never felt patronizing. The story never made me groan. Sometimes I play games, even games that I love, and encounter parts of the story that just make me go, "Oh, really?" So things will show up in the plots of games, tropes and other cliches and aspects that I don't think I would tolerate in any other media, and but in games somehow we do, and yet this game never really made me feel that way. It's not perfect, but it does a great job.
Yeah, right there with you.
It wasn't a groaner at any point that I can remember.
No, I thought the story was really well done and a really interesting, plenty of twists. I mean, there were some predictable characters. If we're past the spoiler, right away that I already forgot his name because he's such a turd. The blonde-haired lead archaeologist,
the Aryan D-bag.
Yeah, he's a jerk from the beginning, and you kind of know he turns on you in a way. He's mostly just he's so fixated on his own, like, glory as being an archaeologist that he's willing to do whatever. So he doesn't directly, like, turn you in. He's more like, this will be a great story for archaeology, and he gets his,
he's willing to subtly allow people to come to harm if it will help him.
If it'll make a better archaeological find or whatever. So right away, and I mean you can just tell out of the gates that he's a douchebag and he's going to be a douchebag.
There are some complicated villains like him and like the other lady whose name I also can't remember at the moment. But there's also just the straight up monster villains, which feel straight out of a good action game. There's those gigantic dudes in the armor.
The Oni. Yeah. This game.
There's that Father Matthias guy.
Yeah, he's just the straight bad guy. And you meet him and he pretends to be a friend at the beginning, but he's just disgusting. And you're like, well, that's the bad guy. I know that out of the gates.
He did not have me fooled.
No. Yeah.
But I think seemed like a great guy.
I don't know if they did not intend for that to be. I will say too, we've talked about it in other games. I forget, it's the guy who he designed one of the other games we've talked about. You show someone something, let them use it, and then let them master it.
I think I quoted a few tweets by Mike Bithell, maybe, that were about that. But yeah.
Yeah, this game does that perfectly. And you see you get the main monster things that they just make like subtle appearances, and then you get like a rope weapon or the ability to shoot the rope. And right out of the gates, when you get it, there's like a real simple task that teaches you how to use the rope. And then by the end of it, you're doing these really complicated rope swings. And then you get the ability to fly up the rope using the automated Ascender. Yeah. And it just the escalation of skill sets is awesome in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a question for you guys. Did the supernatural elements that start cropping up towards the end of the game, did those work for you? I actually, in a way, felt like the game felt more grounded in reality in its first 2/3, and then it went off the rails a little bit with the supernatural elements. And I wouldn't say that wrecked anything, but it wasn't. I don't know. I wondered what you guys thought about that.
I did not have a problem with it, although I did not get all the way to the end of the game. But I feel like that's really in keeping with the game that this most emulates, which is Uncharted. The Uncharted games, I think the first one, just as an example, you get all the way to almost the very end, and in probably the last 2 hours of the game, you start seeing giant blue freaks. But everything up until that point is just normal human guys.
I don't even think you need to compare it to another series. You can just compare it to itself. Tomb Raider always had you fighting mummies and bad guys that were supernatural to a degree.
T-Rexes for some reason.
Yeah. And so I thought it was great. And you're right that it really culminates in the end, but the whole thing has, it's going to end in that pretty early, because the one of the things that happens, you very quickly actually are able to get an SOS out to a local to the military, who send a plane to rescue you. And it happens pretty fast. You're like, oh, crap.
Oh, that was a phenomenal scene.
Yeah, and because the island that you're on is guarded by an ancient dead queen, basically, they control the storms and shoot down the plane. And right away, okay, there's literally
something real weird happened there.
I was playing with subtitles on, and it had all that subtitle, and all the time you'd be hearing this kind of windy Japanese voice in the background, and what it was saying was, "No one leaves, no one leaves, no one leaves."
Yeah, and you see the Oni, which is the big guardian. You see those pretty early on too. So I thought they did a really good job of the slow build, but it's not unexpected. I thought they handled it really well.
So I don't think we could talk about this game without talking about its upcoming sequel just for a moment. I am really, really looking forward to Rise of the Tomb Raider, which is coming late next year, so it's not really upon us yet. I think it's coming out in the fall or winter or something of 2015. It's a little ways off. And I was very disappointed recently to find out that it's actually going to be, at least at first, an Xbox One exclusive. Microsoft has made arrangements with Square Enix, the publishers, and Crystal Dynamics, the developers, to make the game an Xbox One exclusive. And at first, when they initially announced it, the trailer, by the way, looks phenomenal. It's exactly what I was hoping to see. It's looks like a great game. I can't wait. But a little ways after it was announced, it was also announced that it'll be this exclusive for the Xbox One. Now, since it initially was announced that it would be exclusive, they have sort of wheedled out of the Square Enix people. They've gotten them to say that, yes, it is an exclusive with a duration. We don't know how long that duration is, and so we don't know when this game will come out. So I have chosen to think of Rise of the Tomb Raider as a game that will be coming out in 2016. We don't know when. I would be really surprised if it doesn't eventually hit all those other platforms, because it's not a first-party game, and Microsoft can't stop Square Enix from publishing it on other platforms eventually. But when it first comes out next year, it'll be on the Xbox One.
I know, I'm super disappointed. This game was, obviously I've been kind of just raving about it for an hour straight, but I just want more of it. And I don't have an Xbox One, and I have no intentions of buying an Xbox One. I'm completely content with my PS4 and the exclusives that are on that. But, I mean, maybe by next year there'll be enough Xbox One stuff that convinces me. But
it could happen.
This game is, I'll say this is the first notch in the Nate, you should buy an Xbox One belt.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Good,
I don't know
good
what
metaphor,
notch,
bro.
but
Keep using that.
that one fell apart at the end. But I want more of this.
I think they're really doing this to counteract Uncharted 4, which is also announced, and Uncharted 4 will be coming out on the PS4 and also coming out towards the end of 2015. And I think they really wanted to have something that would be on a level with that. And I do think it's going to be on a level with that. I think it's going to be a phenomenal game. And I'm pleased that we'll have both. I'd like to play them both. I may try to borrow an Xbox One or buy one and then return it or something like that just to play this game.
Nice.
But yeah, hopefully we'll all get a chance to play this game sooner or later. But in the meantime, play the original if you haven't already, and you can play it on practically anything. If you have a game-playing device in your house, you can probably play this game. Unless you have a Wii.
Go do it. Go play it.
How much did the game cost you guys?
Oh, man. I think I paid like $4. I know I bought it during a recent Steam sale, and I paid next to nothing for it at your guys' behest, because I would not have played this game if you hadn't told me, and I'm very glad.
Looks like regular price on Steam is $20. There's also the Survival Edition, which includes some extra DLC. I'll be honest with you, I don't recommend it. The Survival Edition, and also the Definitive Edition that is... and then above that, there's also the Game of the Year Edition. Honestly, I don't really know what the difference between those different versions is, except that they include different amounts of DLC. All of the DLC relates to either additional costumes for Laura.
Hooray!
And I mean, maybe if you want some warmer clothes for her, then, that might be worth paying an extra $1 for. But additional costumes for Laura, well, I don't see the point in that, really. And then there's DLC, like level packs and things for the multiplayer. We didn't mention the multiplayer in this game because it's not really worthy of mention. Did either of you dip a toe into the multiplayer of Tomb Raider?
Not at once.
Not yet, but I actually was pretty excited to give it a shot.
Oh.
I loved the combat so much and I also just like playing online against people. So I'm wondering how many people are still actively playing it. I was gonna give it a shot.
Well, too. I'd like to hear what you think of it, but
Yeah.
I think the general consensus on it was amazing amazing single player game, but it's multiplayer. Has all the same controls, but it doesn't... I mean, in the game, Lara is not fighting other Laras. She's fighting a bunch of cultists and monsters and other things, and it's just a different game when you're squaring off against somebody else with all the same badass skills and weaponry at their disposal. It's a different kind of thing. I don't know how well it works. I'd like to hear your opinion on it once you've had a chance to play it, but I don't think I would probably spend a lot of money up front getting DLC for that mode if you're not sure if you'll really love it.
It's Laura versus Laura. Only one Laura survives.
There you go.
Any closing thoughts? Anybody want to say anything before we...
I don't know, man. I just have really been enjoying the game, and I am the only one on this show right now that hasn't finished it, and I'm really looking forward to finishing it.
All right, you do that.
I basically ensured that I finished it before we recorded because I didn't want it to be spoiled. I was that invested that I did not want to talk to you guys about it until I was entirely done with the game.
That's awesome.
Cool.
And I had a ton of fun playing it too. This has been a good week for games, and I hope we'll see you next time for another episode of The Short Game. Just a note to our listeners, this episode will be followed by a 1-week break for the show as we catch up and prepare for Season 2. We have a lot of great games to discuss in the coming months, and we want to hear from you. Let us know which games you'd like to hear on the show. You can send us feedback on Twitter, at our website, or at info@theshortgame.net. See you soon.